This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Karl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Karl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
You've seen and read my 3 Pillars ebook, and now I'm proud to announce my new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship, and it's now out and ready for reading. This new book of mine is a full-length version of the teachings of the 3 Pillars, and in it I show you how to walk in the integrity of eternal and universal laws, in step with the law of attraction to consistently create the life you desire. Now, if you've ever wondered just why you can't consistently manifest all the good, loving, abundant, healthy, and happy things you desire, my new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, will reveal the key in how to do just that. Plus, help you build a rock-solid personal foundation that will stand strong for the ages. Get your copy today. My new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship by Karl Gruber. Available now in ebook and paperback on Amazon.com. Welcome, friends. It is time once again for the World Awakenings, the Fast Track to Enlightenment podcast. I'm your host, Karl Gruber. Now, this is the show where we dive headfirst into all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening. Now, for over 4 years, we have met and spoken with some of the world's and some not of this world's best teachers, masters, and examples of these topics, as we attempt to open your heart and mind to all that will help to pull you out of the drama, trauma, and fear of the egoic world we live in. Now, we have an awesome guest today, but before we meet him, please take a moment to click the link below to purchase a copy of my brand new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship, a book that will help you to build a rock-solid personal foundation for the ages and become a consistent co-creator with the universe of the life you really desire to live. And, of course, please take a moment to click that subscribe button below so that you never miss a single episode. Now, as I mentioned, we have a super interesting guest today, Rahul Singh, who is known as by the moniker as the Bearded Mystic. He is the host of the popular Bearded Mystic podcast that explores the Hindu philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, or non-duality, in a very simple, direct, and practical way. Episodes include discussions into Eastern scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and more, and discussions about everyday spirituality. Rahul has been a spiritual seeker for over 20 years and has an open-minded approach to spirituality and finds that there's no one size that fits all to any approach. And I am so glad to have you on the show. I'm like you, I have an open-minded approach to this. Welcome, Rahul.
Thank you for that introduction, and it's wonderful to be here on this World Awakenings podcast.
Well, and like I told you before we started this, this is a lot of new territory for me. I am a huge non-dualistic spirituality student for a long time. Of course, for me, based in A Course in Miracles. And I'm excited because I see a lot of beautiful parallels between what you're talking about. But, I am really incredibly intrigued about what you do in your in-depth discussions and your look at all non-dualistic spiritual teachings, even like, the Vedanta, we mentioned Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and even the teachings of Lao Tzu, and much of which Westerners are unfamiliar with. Now, before we dive into these teachings, can you give us a bit of an insight of how you came to speak and teach about all of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I've been very fortunate that since a very young age, my parents gave me the upbringing of being spiritual. We went to a temple, a place of worship every Sunday, and I was always in the company of really amazing people who practiced, spiritual awareness. But as I got older, I think the mix of the dogmatic religion and the kind of spirituality I was listening to every week kind of clashed together, because when I was growing up, I was in England, and assemblies used to just be of the Bible, just literally reading the Bible. So it caused a confusion, because one, there was a God that was kind of seen, and you could get to you can never be like it, but there was this type of separation. And then on the other side, on a Sunday, I was told you can unite and have oneness with this God. So that caused a confusion when I was around 20 years old, and that got me through this atheistic period. But in that atheistic period, what I did was I did a lot of studying, and I looked into so many teachers, their books, their teachings, and read the scriptures. And actually it was the Upanishads which actually woke me up a lot, and I was like, I can buy this, I can get it, I understand what they mean by God now, like intellectually. I wouldn't say experientially at that time, but eventually I started meditating, and then ever since then it's been a progressive path of studying, meditation, and practicing. So a bit of karma yogi as well, where you have to kind of serve others selflessly, and I do that a lot in my marriage, so that's a blessing I have.
Oh yeah, you got to do that. But I'm so glad that you pointed out how the dogmatic teachings of traditional religions can butt heads with spirituality, or what I call true non-dualistic spirituality. And for many people like you, it's kind of an epiphany or a crossroads.
Absolutely. It's a shock to the system when you what happens is, and actually a lot of people have gone through this who are my age or below, where I've had conversations with, who listen to my podcast, and they would tell me the same thing, that they went through this atheist agnostic period. And in a way, I'm still agnostic. I wouldn't say I've gone out of that, because I think I'm not too sure about the personal God, but I can say there is a formless reality, because I've experienced that in meditation and in my day-to-day life. But I can't say that about a personal God. So instead of being atheist and dismissing it, I now use that approach of, well, maybe it is, and if it helps somebody, so what? I mean, I've got no problem with it, as long as they don't step on my territory and say that I'm wrong or I'm going to go to hell. It's all good. And then I won't fight back. But well,
if somebody does that, I've taken the attitude anymore. If somebody would say something like that to me, I'm in an area of non-judgment anymore, and I just don't take it personally anymore, and it's not that important. What's the old standard line? Would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy?
Yes.
So I'm just not even going to that fight.
Yes. I mean, when I used to do a lot of TikTok lives, and I used to get a lot of these I would say very dogma focused religious people. And my approach was at first my approach was always this, and it actually got a lot of people to listen to me, which was, I would listen to what the other person said fully, and then if I saw that they were going round and round with their arguments, going in a circular motion, then I would interject and actually say, you know what, I've been patient enough to listen to you for this so far. Now tell me what your point. So, and actually a lot of people appreciated that because they were like, at least you gave time. Even those that were probably didn't entertain my views and didn't like them, but they appreciated that. So I think it's about people just, and the other thing I do is I relay their comments, their points back at them and say, this is what you just said to me, and now this is my response. And they're never prepared for that because they think you're just going to come up with a snarky response straight away. But no, I'll say what you said, then I may do a snarky comment depending on how I feel. But it's, as you said, you got to have that non-judgment. Approach something with an open mind, with respect, because at the end of the day, I don't know if that faith that person has is everything they have. So I don't want to take that away either. So I'm very careful about that.
Well, one thing that I'm really glad you pointed out already is there's a huge, ever-growing category of people in humanity now that are classified what they call SBNR, spiritual but not religious, and especially people of your age. So they have finally said enough of this mind control and power trip of many organized religions. Not that everyone is like that, but most of them are. And it's time for me to look at something greater and deeper. So yeah, there's many research surveys out there that show people are leaving organized religions in mass and going to the SBNR.
Yes. And that's a natural consequence, I feel. And thankfully due to, I believe, immigration. Because if we didn't have immigration, we wouldn't have these diverse views or these diverse ideas. We would never have come across them. So I think due to that, we have to be open-minded and listen. And therefore, whenever we've had doubts, now we can get answers that are not necessarily going to be one way. We could get multiple sources, and we can go to multiple people for the answer, and then weigh which answer works for us. And I think that's the beauty we have today, which probably wasn't there 200, 300 years ago, where people may have had the same feelings as we did, but they didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and if you did, maybe 200, 300, even 400 years ago, if you did have a differing opinion, you were burned at the stake.
Yeah, that's true.
But this is why I'm glad to have somebody like you on the show. So I know this is a huge order, but can you define for us as simply as possible how Eastern non-dual teachings such as Vedanta differ from Western teachings? Is there actually a difference, or are they saying the same things only using different vernaculars?
It depends, because in the East we do have it's absolutely diverse. In terms of Hinduism itself, there are so many philosophies, and in my opinion they're all valid according to where the seeker is. Because one should be a seeker. If one is dogmatic, then I will have a problem with that, and I would say, actually, no, you're wrong. And there are some people, some groups that are dogmatic. I'm not going to turn around to you and say, oh, in Hinduism there's no such thing. There is. But in Advaita Vedanta, the philosophy that I prescribe to, that is, to put it very simply, there is only consciousness. That's it. And this consciousness has no attributes. It's not nothing. It's absolutely full. But it cannot have an attribute, because an attribute belongs to time and space. Now, then the question may appear that, well, okay, you say there's only consciousness. Then what about the world that I see? This beautiful, magnificent nature that we have. This wonderful, diverse garden of human beings and trees and animals. What about that? Is that all unreal then, if there's only consciousness? And what I say, and this comes into Maya, and we talked about that briefly. Maya means that which is real and unreal. So it's real while I'm in this body, because I have a body, and I can, at the end of the day, this is going to go. This is changing. So everything else is subject to change and modification. So that is termed as unreal according to Vedanta, and especially the Bhagavad Gita and Advaita Vedanta. So we say that whatever changes is unreal, but on the relative level, it is real. Like, for example, if you were able to come to the screen and punch me in the face, I can't turn around and say, I am pure consciousness, nothing happened to me. Of course, I'm going to feel pain. And I'm going to say, why did you hurt me? I'm going to respond or react. So we see reality in two ways. The relative reality, which is Maya, so it's both real and unreal. And then we understand that in meditation and in your day-to-day life, in meditation it's at the forefront where you're one with Brahman, the Nirgun Brahman, which we see as the ultimate reality or pure consciousness or formless awareness, as I call it on my podcast. Or when you're in the midst of activity, it's in the background. So it's always there. It's just in the background, because at the end of the day, when I'm working on the podcast editing, I cannot be as pure consciousness. I have to be in the relative reality, but I can still be aware of that formless awareness. So that's I don't know if there's a difference between that and the Western side.
Of course, I'm a huge student of A Course in Miracles, and what I'm hearing you saying really is in alignment with what A Course in Miracles. You talk about Brahman or ultimate consciousness. A Course in Miracles states that the only true reality is all that is. Or God, or, again, whatever term you want to use, that's the only true reality. And what we see, as you said, this beautiful green lush world, even with all the crap going on it, it is beautiful. It is actually a projection of our separation that we, as again, I'm using a Course in Miracles terms, we, the Son of God, fell asleep into a dream of separation, and that the ultimate reality is there is no separation. There is only unity and oneness. And, you and I discussed before we came on Lynn McTaggart's book, The Intention Experiment and the Field. The field, of course, is the unseen connection of all that exists. Greg Braden calls it the divine matrix. So again, it's interesting, there's different words for the same thing. And that's why I'm so glad to have you on this show. It's just great.
Yes. So the field, we would say, is Maya. But even, as much as it is unreal, what I tend to say to people is that without that formless awareness, that ultimate reality, Maya cannot be. So therefore, appreciate what you have and see. And what we do as a practice every Saturday is to see that formless awareness in this world, in the universe, and see it as part and parcel and filled with that same ultimate, that basically the ultimate reality is within everything. It cannot escape anything. And that's the approach that I use. So we don't become, so we still remain life positive and life affirmative, rather than what can happen with some non-dual teachers who've adopted non-duality from the East and have kind of hijacked it, I would say, with the idea that there's no realization, there's no one here, there's no story, there's no that. That, in my opinion, is a premature and an immature understanding of non-duality, because to say that is you're saying no to experience, and one cannot deny experience.
Yeah, it really is interesting. I believe that Brahman or ultimate enlightenment is attainable while we perceive we're in this body in this 3D world. I think it's attainable, but yet you can go through this life in this body just being enlightened, but you don't even have to say anything. You can just smile a lot and not take offense and enjoy life and nature. And you're just, like I said earlier, it's just all the other stuff is not important because you have achieved the Brahman while you're within this body.
Yeah, and what I would say, and I make it very clear with anyone that listens to the podcast or communicates with me individually, is that you don't have to achieve anything. You're already at the place where you need to be. You just don't know it yet.
Yes.
So all we're doing is unveiling or revealing that you are already Brahman or Brahman. You're already that which you're seeking. You're not anything separate to that. If you were anything separate, then there would be a journey. But yes, there is a journey. I'm not saying there isn't a journey. There is a journey to understand or to unveil that ultimate truth. And as my teacher once said, that the beauty is that the journey is the destination, and the destination is in the journey. And only a few people really understand the deeper nuances in that statement, because people tend to think that, well, if I reach the destination, then that's it. There's a lot of people that just, and sometimes it's, like I said, sometimes it's premature, and then people stop growing. So with my teacher saying that, it gave me the insight that even if I become enlightened, which I would never declare as a personal choice, even if I was, I would always know that, and I always know that I will be on a journey, and there's always going to be a refinement as I continue. There's a lot to study, so.
Oh man, that's an understatement. You know, speaking of studying, have you had the opportunity to look at A Course in Miracles and read any of it and see what it's about?
I haven't done too much. I know about it. I'm aware of it. I've been aware of it for a good couple of years, but I haven't really studied it at all, really.
Well, basically what it is what is taught in Vedanta and the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, but from the Western perspective. And kind of in the Christian vernacular, even though it has nothing to do with religion, it was specifically written so that the Westerners could understand a little bit more about this. I mean, the traditions of the Eastern teachings have been around for millennia, but I don't know if the Westerns have really had anything like this at all. So we're a little behind the curve, but we're finally catching up with it. But I'm curious, how would you actually define what is non-dualistic spirituality for our viewers and listeners?
So non-dualistic spirituality would really be just the understanding that there is only Nirgun Brahman. Is to first have that as the simple understanding, and then to grow from that, to directly experience that. One thing is understanding something intellectually, which we kind of need. We need to have that foundation first to understand that we're not this body and mind, and that we are something beyond that. So how can we get to know that? Well, first of all, the first experiment we can do is with the body. And we know that as we've aged, we've been watching ourselves age. Our body's gone through changes, but the watcher within has not changed at all. We've had many thoughts, and thoughts have appeared. We've gone through many different emotional states. The watcher has remained the same despite the changes in the emotional states. So if we've been able to witness this and watch this, then that means that the watcher within, the witness consciousness, that awareness, must be everlasting, because it's not subject to change. And that's why it's very important to first have that foundational understanding that we're not the body, and why we're not the body and mind. And simply that's because of whatever is modified or changed is unreal, and whatever is changeless is real. So just that basic understanding, and then from there bringing it into our day-to-day life. So going back into that awareness whenever we can, as much as possible, understand, and to help maybe at times, because we may still feel a bit of duality, and that's fine. Why not expand our awareness to everything, to all that we see and perceive through our senses? So why not? So, we can do that and see the oneness in everything. And on top of that, with that oneness, the non-dualistic spirituality, once we get to an attainment, an awakening or enlightenment, then we should be in that awareness that is formless, more or less all the time. Not saying it's at the forefront, but in the background at least, that we are, whenever we want, we can go back to it without going through any lengthy process. But what I will say as a warning, or a footnote, maybe not a warning, but that we must first establish ourselves in this and keep working at it before we prematurely declare anything or feel anything. The other aspect of non-dualistic spirituality, which is a very important part that I talk about a lot, is the human aspect, which is our hearts should have compassion for everybody and for everything, and to understand the larger picture, to think of the long term. Because even though we are temporary beings, and our life is only a matter of literally a blink in the universe's eyes, it's nothing, but we should think long term about the future, that every action we do will have a response. Maybe not now, but it could be 100 years down the line. So it's having that vision that every action we do, every thought we have, is going to have a response later. So there's one living it, and then living in that realization, and one when you're just in that realization. And I think what's triggered a lot of changes has been, for me, this pandemic, the COVID pandemic. It changed it showed us two things. One, on a body level, that this disease could affect anyone by literally being an airborne virus. So it showed that it would go to anyone. There was no partiality. It literally showed us that the human body is kind of one in many ways. Everyone, everything, everyone. That was an interesting thing. The second thing, how we respond to that. Are we going to think about our personal freedoms, or are we going to think about the freedom of everybody? And that was, for me, an interesting thing to observe, not only within myself, but in society at large. So when I created this podcast, and it was out after the pandemic, in the first or second year of it, I realized the importance of living a life that is grounded in humanity and compassion. And that was the conscious choice I made, even though I would say some of my views would probably be seen. It didn't make me popular, shall I say. It didn't make me popular. It probably made me less popular. And I know I lost a few listeners because of my COVID-19 episode that I did.
Oh, interesting, huh?
Yeah.
All judgment. Yeah.
All judgment, and they're entitled to. They're entitled to. I mean, they're absolutely fine. It's fine.
Well, and too, we were talking about, our bodies. Of Course in Miracles teaches that the body is wholly neutral, and it only changes and reacts to things because we direct it from our mind, and the body is actually animated by spirit or ultimate consciousness. And this is why it really can't change over, the body may disappear because it's no longer needed, but ultimate consciousness, we just continue in that field.
Yes, it's very interesting because Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that basically when this body gets worn out or tired, doesn't necessarily give an age, just says it gets worn out and tired, then it has to look for another one. The Jeev within, the spirit within, will have to look for another body unless it is enlightened and liberated. It has achieved salvation, whatever word we want to use. So until that's done, we'll keep continuing on getting a body according to the karmas that we've achieved. That's according to the Bhagavad Gita. And I think that's true to a sense because, yes, it is our spirit that defines things. It is our previous memories that may have its effect in this life. Remember, I talked about the long term into the future, but there's also a long past as well, which we cannot ignore. So understanding that there is that we just make better choices with our body and our mind, especially the mind now, because we've kind of understood what's good for the body, like in terms of exercise and diet and everything. We have that information now, but mental health is still like one of those weird things that we still have not understood, despite the amount of studies and papers and books out there. We still haven't mastered that, and we're still going through, in my opinion, the biggest pandemic is the mental health crisis. I think we just still haven't been able to conquer the mind.
Gee, in that case, that pandemic of the mental health has been going on for all of mankind's history.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Well, but the ultimate goal is our awakening to Brahman, to all that is. There's multiple names for it. That's the ultimate goal, and my understanding from many of my guests on this show, and I've had beings channeled from other stars and that type of thing, and they all say the same thing, that we come here in each lifetime with a learning experience, and then it's supposed to build on to the next one until ultimately we don't have to come back.
Yes. I kind of follow that in many ways, and yes, we do need to, the main focus for anyone, and I also have made this very clear in my podcast, that if you're listening to it, the main aim is that you want to be liberated. You want to transcend this cycle of birth and death, and you want to go over it now. You want to be fully free. And it's not a goal that needs to be attained. It just needs to be understood that you are free. Why are we still keeping ourselves bounded? In the Bhagavad Gita, which is a very radical non-dual text of the East, of Advaita Vedanta, Ashtavakra says that if you think you're bound, you're bound. If you think you're free, you're free. Again, he said think. It's all here in the mind. So go on.
No, that's just like the classic line: if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can. But it's also interesting that you just said Gary Renard, one of the premier teachers of A Course in Miracles. I know Gary, and I've been at his workshops and met him and hung out with him. He says that the A Course in Miracles is a radical teaching, non-dual teaching too. It's radical. It's like nothing people have really ever heard or thought they have heard.
Interesting. So in Advaita Vedanta, what we have is we have the first three texts which are considered to be vernacular. Every Hindu should read them, regardless of if one is a dualistic in a dualistic tradition or non-dualistic tradition, which is the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras or Vedanta Sutras. Everyone is expected to have read that. Not the case, but people probably only know about the Bhagavad Gita and that's it. Only some, the more younger people know about the Upanishads, which is promising for me. Then you have these other radical texts, which are not so, they don't mince their words when it comes to this non-dual truth. And that's things like Ashtavakra Gita, Avadut Gita, Ribhu Gita, there's the Yog Vashisht, there's so many of them. And those are important. But in today's day and age, we do have, like, for example, I've had a Western upbringing. So in a way, my mind is still a bit Western and still a bit Eastern. So I have this weird hybrid of two. And many, like me, have that weird hybrid. And what we need to do, and especially someone in the West, whenever they encounter Vedanta, they should read the foundational text, like the works from Adi Shankaracharya ji, who was a mystic who created the Advaita Vedanta tradition. And he has texts like Atma Bodh, Tattva Bodh, which and Vivek Jamudini, which everyone should read, because that gives you the foundation required, so that when you read the Bhagavad Gita, the Brahma Sutras, or the Upanishads, you get what it means straight away. You automatically will start seeing the hidden messages within. So that's very essential.
Well, this is just so awesome, because I already feel myself opening up to understanding, the Eastern look at non-dualistic spirituality. I mean, of course, it's a lifetime journey, a lifetime study. But I'm curious. So, how does the Bhagavad Gita, the Advaita Vedanta, view something like the ego? Is there a term or view of the ego in those texts?
Yes, ego. So ego is seen as amkara. So the amkara is basically I, the everything that we associate with the I am. So I am the body, I am the mind, I am British, I am American, I am male, I am female. All these, whatever we identify with, other than the true self, our true nature, that is part of the ego. And with the ego, see, it's a bit more complex. So you have the ego, but then you also have your karma of your previous lives and the present life that you have to deal with. Then you have memories or vrittis, movements from the previous life that have been superimposed in this life. So some of your habits, those are the things. So that constitutes the person. And then that person has to break free from that, and disidentify with that. Or shall I just say, not disidentify, but direct the attention to what we really are, rather than identifying as just the body and mind and all the lovely stuff that goes with it. So we should look at ourselves more as formless beings, rather than, or see ourselves as a formless being, rather than just this body and mind. I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider us being the body and mind. We just need to understand it's a limitation. It's bounded. It has a certain level it can reach to, and that's it. Nothing more than that. But yeah, there is the concept of ego, but we don't necessarily straight away call it ego. There's no one word for it, but basically it's whatever you consider to be I am that has a form or a name attached to it.
It almost sounds like you're talking about other lifetimes along with this lifetime, like the Akashic records, like we're carrying weights on our shoulder from other lives, and most of us don't realize that, and we have to overcome that too. That's a heavy burden.
It's a heavy burden, but there's a few ways we can address that problem. One is, again, first through studying the scriptures, with a competent and learned and scholarly guru, or a guru not just scholarly, but maybe someone who has mastered that aspect of knowing who they are. So I think having a teacher is very, very important. It's been very important in my life, and although I may have different views today about gurus and their importance and how it should be as a system, but I still find it's important. The only thing I would say now is I feel that gurus should now slim down in terms of their numbers. They should look at having a more intimate group, rather than going for the masses and going for 1 million followers or thousands of followers, because how are you going to help someone individually? I have a unique set of problems. The next person has a unique set of problems. The other has a unique set of problems. How are you going to address those if you're just giving a standard format or a standard answer to everything? Unless the seeker knows that when an answer is given, it's just for the person who asked a question. But not everyone will read the sayings of Ramana Maharishi in that way, or the sayings of, say, Sadhguru today, Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev, or Amma, or anyone that they look up to today. So I think it's very important. So having those things are very important. Having a guru, or having what I would term as a friend, having studying the scriptures, having a meditation practice, very important.
Yes.
Even if it's just for 5 minutes a day. A lot of people say I don't have time in the day. The funny thing I say is, well, if you have time to go to the restroom, go to the toilet, meditate there. I don't care. Everywhere is holy. There's no place where there isn't divinity. So if it means that that is a place where you can get 5 minutes, so be it. We all live busy lives. I get it. But there's no reason to stop yourself. So meditation is very important. Meditation on what, though? Because yes, we can just meditate and try to get rid of our thoughts, but I would say the most important thing is just meditating on that awareness within, the watcher within. Observe the mind for a few moments before we can get to observing or being aware of our own awareness, until we can get to that point.
I love what you said. I didn't know my bathroom is a holy place. This is awesome.
There you go.
Actually,
but it's a good question. Where is the divine not?
Yeah, the field.
Yeah, where is the field not? Field is everywhere, right?
Yeah. Well, I was listening to one of your episodes. I think it was from this past December, and you kind of touched on science. And what are your thoughts on science, specifically quantum physics, now saying the same things that spiritual teachings have been saying all along?
I'm a bit careful on the science aspect. Yes, there is obviously there's consciousness studies, and there's a lot of work being done in that. And the current paradigm of science, of scientific theory, is the materialist approach, which I'm not a big fan of, and neither are a lot of people now. Philosophers are now going away from that and saying it's not valid. On the aspect of quantum, it's interesting, but I don't want to associate it to spirituality as much as probably other people do. I like to still keep it separate, but feel that there should be a dialogue between the two. So keep them separate, but there should be like you have interfaith dialogue. There should be an interspiritual scientific dialogue going on, which is happening, especially in the field of consciousness studies. So the Dalai Lama hosts like a conference every other year to discuss things with scientists about consciousness and what is consciousness. He's been so courageous to even say, does the brain create consciousness, or is consciousness prior to the brain? We need to find this answer out. So he's kept it as I think he knows the answer. I think he was just inviting the scientists to think a bit more than that. So, but I will say this, in terms of consciousness studies, it's not a problem for us in the East. We have found the answer. It's there in the Upanishads, in the Gita, it's there. We've got philosophical systems that can help us understand that. But I understand with the West there is, and I understand that because I'm also being educated in the West, that there is a hard problem of consciousness, but really there isn't a problem at all.
Well, and I know you did mention that the Dalai Lama is one of the proponents of the, bringing science and spirituality together. One of my very, very first guests I had on his show 4 years ago was Brendan D. Murphy from Australia, who wrote, he's a young guy, he wrote this gargantuan treatise called The Grand Illusion, a synthesis of science and spirituality. And I would suggest you look it up because, he really goes in amazing depth into how those two have meshed and are starting to intermingle. And even my own book that I just published, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, you mentioned a material aspect of all this. One of the biggest criticisms, and I'm a teacher and coach of the Law of Attraction, one of the biggest criticisms of the Law of Attraction, and rightfully so, is, well, it's just a way to get stuff. I'm going to manifest a new car, or I'm going to manifest $100,000. But no, if you do base your life on true spiritual principles, and then understand that what you think attracts like attracts like, you're based on a rock solid personal foundation. And therefore, it's not just about getting stuff. It's about living a life where you can achieve Brahman, achieve enlightenment. And yes. It's really interesting.
Yeah, you're right, because I remember I haven't read The Secret or The Greatest Secret by Rhonda. Is it Rhonda Byrne?
Rhonda Byrne.
And I did look at the reviews on Amazon. So I looked at the reviews for The Secret, and he was like, "This is amazing. This is great. The positive stuff." When it came to The Greatest Secret, I was quite surprised at some of the reactions. I was like, a lot of people saying, "What is she talking about? What is this?" Because I think she more or less was entering the territory of awareness, of consciousness.
That's funny, because I have not read The Greatest Secret.
Yeah, and apparently that's what she's done, and she's faced backlash from some of her, very ardent fans, I would say. I won't call them followers, because they're probably more likely to be fans. But it's interesting, because I think a lot of people do view law of attraction, and if you see, if you go on TikTok, my friend, law of attraction is all about getting what you want. It's not about connecting with everyone and everything, and understanding that there's this field, and that whatever we think is going to come out, and we can and we should be in charge of our thoughts. They don't even go like that. They just want you to say, a lot of people just say, I remember once someone said on a TikTok video, they said 2022 is going to be your greatest year, and they said that, and then I was like, now, would you say it's the greatest year now for Prince Charles, or because he's just faced a loss, or anyone that's lost or grieving? Like, it's not their best year. And so little things like that, I do find it interesting. And they'd be like, it was 2020 is going to be your greatest year because you can manifest anything. And I was like, what are you saying to people? Because yes, you may say that to someone who's a practitioner, they will understand you. But saying it to the general public, there's a problem, because they're not trained, they've not studied to understand what you're talking about. Yep. They're going to get the headline and run with it.
And I would, I'm adamant that in order to manifest the life you really want, you have to build it on those eternal, unchanging, universal spiritual principles. There's no other way. Otherwise, it ain't going to work. To put it that way.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. That's very beautiful what you've said. I think that's very important.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We're talking to Rahul Singh, the Bearded Mystic, which I love. He has his own podcast, the Bearded Mystic Podcast. You got to check it out. He's got multiple episodes. I've got one last question I would like to ask you. Do you think it's possible for Western trained spiritual minds to understand Eastern teachings and integrate it to create a better life for themselves?
Absolutely. And it's been happening since the 1960s, 1950s, probably even before that, in the early 1900s, when Swami Vivekananda came over. Yeah. So,
I used to be a hippie, so.
Okay, that's awesome. I wish the hippies remained as hippies, so we could have had probably a lot more progressive society. But that aside, yes, absolutely. I think Westerners can definitely integrate into Eastern spirituality and possibly understand it with a lot more sincerity, because there's no preconceived notions, if they're able to get rid of those preconceived notions. If the Western mind is ready to get their whole worldview shattered, then the East is ready. The East is ready.
Isn't that funny too when you think back in the hippie era? Actually, the Beatles were the opening to the West for Eastern religions and teachings, and they did a beautiful job with it too. They really brought a lot of that and opened the hearts and minds of Westerners to it. But
they did, and what I would say, even prior to that, like I mentioned, with Swami Vivekananda and Paramahansa Yogananda, without them, I think, especially America, is very, very lucky, because they had these two spiritual giants come from the East and create their ashrams here in the West. And the best speakers are probably definitely from the Ramakrishna mission of Swami Vivekananda. And yes, absolutely. And I think what's more important, I would say, for the East is to find that common ground with Western philosophy, which we've done, thankfully, due to the exposure we got with the colonial period. We were able to understand the Western mindset as well. So we were able to adapt our message a little bit to cater for the West. Well,
and I think what we're doing here, you and I, is a big step. I think this has been a beautiful conversation. Like I said, I have so much to learn. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, it's a lifetime journey, but it would be great if in the future we could continue this conversation. And thank you for being so kind and being here and putting up with my non-understanding of a lot of things. I really appreciate it. Thank you. The bearded mystic, Rahul Singh, thank you for being on the show.
I just want to say thank you for having me, first of all. And most of all, although you say non-understanding, I think you do understand very well. And you actually... A lot of people don't tend to understand these very abstract concepts that I was talking about, but you were able to grasp it. So that says a lot about you as a person, and you as a seeker and a teacher on this podcast. So, thank you for having me, and I would say for putting up with my abstract concepts.
Well, this is cool. Thank you for those kind words. And now I'm going back into the 3D body world. I'm going to a baseball game after this.
Awesome. You got to enjoy everything. Remember, the awareness is always there. This formless is always around us and within us. And you can see it in that baseball game. One thing before I end, I felt like I had to add this, that the main purpose after freedom is to feel ananda, which is bliss. So... whenever we go back to awareness, we go back to our base of bliss, our foundation of bliss. So I pray that everyone that listens to this at least opens the doors to bliss, which is always around them, everywhere, 24/7. It's a shop that never shuts.
Wow. And with those beautiful words, thank you, Rahul, the bearded mystic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Karl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.